So thank you. You guys really helped solve some of the problems I was having in this tank. So I wanted to do kind of an update video and show you what's new. Hey fish friends, how's it going? Zenzo with Tazawa Tanks. So as a lot of you know, I am getting back into plants. I do keep a lot of cichlid tanks, and I've got a fish room downstairs, and overall I've got about 35, 36 tanks. But this tank was a planted tank a long time ago. It was a low-tech tank with a dirt substrate, and then I turned it into a cichlid tank, and now I'm turning it back into a planted tank. Although this time around I want to do high-tech, so I got some high-tech lighting from aquariumcoop.com, and got some aqua soil and a lot of ferts and things like that. So anyway, I was having some real issues with algae. I had some plants melting. I still have, some dieback of the leaves, so, that's something that I'm still kind of dealing with, but it's a lot better than it was. I mean, it was really, really bad to the point where, I was getting upset and not quite sure what to do. So many of you had commented on, just hang in there, it'll get better. You're kind of going through the melting phase or the algae balance phase. And a lot of you had some really good comments, so I thought I would share some of those comments as far as what the advice was and show you the result. So here we are at the tank. It's 65 gallons, and as far as stocking, I've got S-repens on the bottom. I've got some Crips over there, some Wendetii, and I got this giant Apontigeton plant that has just gotten nuts. I've got some Java fern over here, and then I've got some different swords over there, and a little banana plant. And I do have some floating plants. So one of the issues that I had when I set this tank up, obviously I didn't have the balance right as far as the light and the nutrients, and I had a tremendous amount of algae growing on all the surfaces. I had these huge kind of clumps of almost like mucusy kind of algae growth growing on the leaves of all these plants. And one of the things that you guys had mentioned is adding some floating plants. And so that's what I did. I had some floating plants in another tank, and I threw those in there, and it wasn't enough. So I thought, wait a minute, I've got these giant floating plants outside in the pond. They're the water hyacinth. So I just kind of lowered the water level a little bit. You can't really tell because of the rim, but it is down a little bit, a couple inches. And I put the water hyacinth in there. So essentially they're kind of fast growing, and they really suck up the nutrients in the water. And what I noticed is that really helped reduce the amount of ferts that were in the water that were too much for the plants and their slow growth initially. And it really combated the algae. The other thing that I did is I adjusted the lighting. So as many of you know, I've got the Fluval 3.0 plant light on here that I got from aquariumcoop.com. And with that plant light, you can adjust the time that the plant runs. So normally for a lot of my tanks, I just have them on timers, but this is where you can get the app and set it up on your phone and go through a different cycle. So I changed that cycle. I lowered the hours in which the light was on, and that probably also helped combat the algae. And then the other thing that a lot of you recommend that I do is add carbon. So in the previous video on this tank, you may have noticed that I opened a package that had Easy Green. I have it in this koozie right now. The Easy Iron and the Easy Carbon. And a lot of you mentioned that the Easy Carbon really helps in combating the algae. So I don't know exactly what was the factor, if it was one more than the other or a combination of all three, but the combination of the Easy Carbon, the reduction in light, and adding the floating plants really eliminated all the algae, or most of it at least. So you can still see there's some algae on the back glass there, and there's a little bit on the rocks, and that's fine. I don't mind that. I actually kind of like it. What I don't want is the algae outcompeting the plants, covering their leaves, and causing them to die off. So as far as the plants are concerned, this Apontigeton plant went bananas. I had it downstairs in another tank. When I moved it up here, the thing doubled in size. It's pretty incredible here. Java fern, typically slow growing, but it looks great. No melting there whatsoever. What I was surprised is my experience in the past is with Crips is that you do get some die off or some melting, and those did not melt at all. They are beautiful, still showing the red. It probably doesn't show up on his camera, but I'm seeing some reds. But I got a lot of dieback on the S. repens. Now, a lot of you mentioned that this is common, that the S. repens is very hardy and that it will grow back. And as you can see, it's not looking terrible. Eventually, the goal is to grow a full carpet in this area inside of these rocks at about the height of the rocks, so it'll cover the rocks so you won't really see the rocks. And that will be all filled in with S. repens. I'll have to trim those obviously with scissors. And then back here I have some different swords that my goal is to have them kind of grow up a little bit taller. There is a banana plant back there too. Now if these swords don't grow quite the way I want, I might do some more background plants. Some of you had mentioned jungle val. That might be an option, but I'm not sure if I really want jungle val covering that whole area, because then there'll be a lot of trimming and then it'll grow up top and I'll have to trim it on top to keep it from covering the light. The other thing that I did, I'm not sure if you can see there, you can. So back there, that's my overflow box. So I've got a sump on this tank, and the slats, the kind of the slats that you have in the overflow box to allow the water to flow through, they were kind of large. I didn't care before because I had cichlids in here, but with the planet tank, I'm going to have some smaller fish in here, and I didn't want those getting sucked into the overflow box. So I had some moss upstairs in my daughter's tank. I just took a big clump of moss and weaved it in and out of the overflow box to kind of cover it. It's kind of like a screen, but it's a natural screen. So it's plants, so it's going to continue to help with the filtration, allow for some hiding spaces for some small, fish maybe if they don't get sucked down, but it keeps the fish from getting sucked down into the sump. The other thing that I did is I added CO2. Now, if you recall before, I did kind of that DIY CO2 system where you have just like a glass bottle in the tank and you fill it, you submerge it upside down, and then you fill it with CO2 gas. And then that gas kind of leaches down into the water over like a day and a half or 2 days. And then you repeat the process. It was fun. It was an experiment, but I didn't plan on doing that long term. So I did buy a CO2 big bottle, as you guys saw in a previous video. I do have the regulator, and that regulator is on a timer, and then I've got the diffuser and a bubble counter and everything. Now, before I get into that, originally I had the diffuser kind of piped up and around, and I had the diffuser right back here. And so I had all the CO2 bubbles rising right in this area, kind of where I have that never clog air stone in the back. So back here I had this stainless steel diffuser, and I had all these CO2 bubbles rising. Now the CO2 levels were fine. I do have my little drop checker over here, and it's kind of on the bluish green side, so a little bit low, but these just kicked on recently, so towards the end of the day it'll be more green. But anyway, what I found is that it was a lot of bubbles, those micro bubbles that the CO2 causes. And although it's harmless, it doesn't look very good, in my opinion. So I thought, well, wait a minute, I have a sump. Why don't I put it somewhere else in the system? I thought originally about putting it in the back of the overflow box, but then I was worried about the CO2 kind of getting lost in the system as it went through the wet dry. So instead what I did, and I'll show you here, is I put it in the sump, in the return side. So there you can see, I kind of have the sticker in the way. But there is the diffuser. It's a long stainless steel rod there. So there is the diffuser, and I've got this little light there to kind of be able to highlight it. Let me move that around. Let's see if I can, no, it's not gonna give you a better shot. So anyway, as you can see, those are the CO2 bubbles. And those are getting sucked up in the return of the pump. Some of them are getting chopped up and they're coming back into the tank. And then I put my bubble counter there and my one-way valve as well. So essentially, I've eliminated maybe 80% of those micro bubbles. Now they still are coming into the tank, as you can see here, through the return of the sump, but it's a lot less than it was before. And I think that the impeller on the return pump is kind of chopping those bubbles up even smaller possibly. So anyway, I think it looks great. I'm really happy with it. I'm not happy as far as how the S. repens looks. I really want that to fill in. So we'll see how that works out. And in the long run, if it doesn't work out with the S. repens, I might do another carpeting plant. But all the research that I've done so far leads me to believe that the S. repens will be a pretty good carpeting plant if I keep trimming it. So anyway, that's all I had for now. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate all of your feedback and you know, your comments and your encouragement. So it really means a lot. I really appreciate that. As far as how to set up the CO2 canister, I didn't film that. I didn't film how I set up the regulator. However, Aquarium Co-op does have a really good video that I watched to learn how to do this myself. So if you go to their site, their YouTube page, you can follow along and see how that works. I'll put a link of that down below in the description. Anyway, that's all I had for now. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.